Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Poland today, meeting the top leadership of the country and the Indian community. We'll discuss the strategic significance of this visit and why India is investing in Central Europe. Of course, the larger focus is on his next stop, Ukraine. The first visit by any Indian Prime Minister to Ukraine. It comes at a time when Kiev is attacking Moscow with drones. In the US, the Obamas are firing up the Democratic Party to build support for Kamala Harris, while Silicon Valley seems to be throwing its weight behind Donald Trump. In India, the rupee is falling and inflation fears have resurfaced again. We'll explain why. Mpox cases are on the rise. Argentina has quarantined a whole ship as Africa appeals for vaccines. In Sweden, the hunting season has begun and the government has given the green light for the killing of 20% of their bear population. India's Commerce Minister has raised concerns about the boom in the e-commerce business. Japan is suffering a cultural shock after their convenience store chain 7-Eleven gets a buyout bid. In Kenya, a vampire serial killer is on the loose and 8 cops have been arrested for this. And can you outsource parenting? Graduates from top colleges are offering child companionship and parents are renting their services. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Top US diplomat Antony Blinken leaves West Asia empty-handed. There is still no Gaza ceasefire deal. Israel and Hamas have blamed each other for delaying the truce deal. The US has warned both parties that this may be the last chance to avoid a broader war. West African juntas write to the United Nations. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger accused Ukraine of supporting rebel groups in the Sahel region. The juntas claim Kiev is threatening regional stability. Ukraine has denied the allegations. Earlier this month, Mali and Niger cut diplomatic ties with Kiev. Taiwan's president warns that China's authoritarianism won't stop with the island, urging democratic countries to unite to curb Beijing's expansionism. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory. Lai Ching-te took charge of the self-ruled island in May. Beijing has labelled him a quote-unquote dangerous separatist. 4 bodies found from the luxury yacht that sank off Sicily. This takes the total death toll to 5. Hopes of finding the other missing passengers alive are fading fast. The yacht is largely intact and resting on the seabed some 50 meters down. And Tesla to recall more than 9,000 Model X SUVs in the US. It's over a trim on the roof that could separate, increasing the risk of a crash. This year, Tesla has recalled nearly 3 million vehicles over safety concerns, but this is a rare physical recall for the Elon Musk-owned company. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Poland. He landed in Warsaw earlier today, where he got a ceremonial welcome. Now, this is a very important trip for both countries, India and Poland. No Indian Prime Minister has visited Poland in 4 decades. This is the first in 45 years. Of course, the headlines don't reflect that. They focus more on Modi's next stop, war-torn Ukraine. But you can't just fly into Kiev. You must take a train from Poland to the Ukrainian capital. And that is primarily why Prime Minister Modi is in Warsaw, the Polish capital. Having said that, the first leg is significant too. So tonight we are focusing on Poland. Prime Minister Modi got a ceremonial welcome at the airport. As we speak, he is visiting war memorials in Warsaw. First was the Jam Sahib Memorial. It honors a king from Jamnagar in the Indian state of Gujarat. He sheltered Polish children during the Second World War. Then he visited the monument to the Battle of Monte Cassino. Again, a Second World War memorial. what's next? Prime Minister Modi will address the Indian community later today. Around 25,000 Indians live in Poland. 5,000 of them are students. The rest are mostly traders and tech experts. Tomorrow, Modi will meet Polish leaders, both President Andrea Duda and Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Afterwards, he will take a train to Kiev, a journey that will last around 10 hours. But more on that tomorrow. For now, let's look at Prime Minister Modi's mission in Warsaw. Listen to his statement before departure, and I'm quoting, "Poland is a key economic partner in Central Europe. Our mutual commitment to democracy and pluralism further reinforces our relationship." The operative part here is Central Europe. Let's take a small geography lesson and let's look at all the countries that are part of Central Europe. You have Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Austria. This is the European heartland. To the west, you have the likes of France and Italy. To the east, you have Ukraine, Romania, and Moldova. Now, Modi is focusing on Central Europe. We saw evidence of that last month when the Prime Minister travelled to Austria. Again, it was a long due trip, the first by an Indian Prime Minister in more than 40 years. I guess the question is why? Why the sudden interest in Central Europe? What is the strategic angle here? Central and Eastern Europe are on a path of rediscovery. In the last century, they were pawns, either occupied by the Soviet Union or satellite states of Moscow. That equation changed after the 1990s. A lot of these countries are now allied with the US, but not like your Britain or Germany. They're not lackeys who blindly follow. These countries have their own priorities. Look at Slovakia or Hungary, for example. Both countries are members of the NATO alliance, yet they're not sending weapons to Ukraine, which makes them an independent political bloc in the EU, possibly a power center in the future. And that's one reason why India should reach out to them. The second reason is the business angle. Central and East Europe are growing faster than the West. Poland is the 6th largest economy in the EU. It makes up 4% of the EU GDP. So India stands to benefit by reaching out to them. Our bilateral trade is almost $6 billion. Poland is India's largest trading partner in Central and Eastern Europe. So Warsaw can be New Delhi's window to this region. It's a stable democracy, it's a growing economic powerhouse, and it has a strong military. There's one problem though. India is not the only one wooing this region. China is doing the same. Xi Jinping visited Europe in May 2024. He visited just one country in Western Europe, that was France. His other 2 stops were Serbia and Hungary, both in Central and Southeastern Europe. So expect this sub-region to heat up. China, the US, Russia, all of them have stakes here, which is why Prime Minister Modi is travelling there. He is not looking at Europe as a single entity. He is focusing on the factions within. In 2022, he travelled to Denmark. He held a summit with leaders of the Nordic nations. Last year, he travelled to Greece. Again, the first prime ministerial visit in 40 years. So the idea is quite simple. India is looking to make up for lost time. While we ignored ties beyond Western Europe, others made gains. These trips are an effort to fix that. But we have to say, don't expect quick gains. Visits only lay the foundation for a strong relationship. The key is to build on them. Poland, like I said, is just the first stop of Prime Minister Modi's trip. The next is Ukraine. He will leave for Kiev tomorrow evening. And the world will be watching this visit. One, because it's unprecedented. Narendra Modi will be the first Indian leader to visit Ukraine, the first ever. And reason number 2, because of the timing. The war has shifted. It is now being fought on Russian land. Kiev is ramping up attacks on Moscow, and Prime Minister Modi's visit comes right in the middle of it. Take a look. These are Ukrainian forces pounding the Russian military. The fighting is happening in Kursk, It is in western Russia. It's been at the center of Ukraine's operations for the past 2 weeks. They've captured Russian territory here, more than 1,200 square kilometers of it. And this includes 92 settlements. And the success in Kursk seems to have emboldened Ukraine. Today they launched an attack on Moscow. Yes, the Russian capital. It came under a drone attack. At least 11 drones were shot down over Moscow. This was one of the largest drone attacks by Ukraine, and the target wasn't just Moscow. This was a broader operation. Reports say Ukraine launched more than 20 drones. Most of them were detected over Moscow, at least 11 in all were detected over Moscow. 6 other drones were destroyed over Belgorod, 3 over the Kaluga region, 2 over Kursk, and another 2 over the Tula region. These drones were all destroyed before they could do any harm, and perhaps that was not even Ukraine's objective. These attacks were more like a demonstration of capability. Kiev has shown how deep inside Russia it can strike. It can fly drones as far as Moscow, and Zelensky is using this demonstration to put pressure on the West. He wants his Western partners to lift restrictions on their weapons. And this has been a long-standing demand. The West doesn't allow Ukraine to use a lot of lethal weapons inside Russia. It is not allowed to use these weapons to strike Russia directly. The weapons are meant for self-defense, not offense. But Ukraine wants these curbs to be removed. It wants the ability to strike Russia with greater force.
If partners removed all existing restrictions on the use of weapons on Russian territory, we would not need physical entry, particularly into the Kursk region, to protect our Ukrainian citizens in the border area and destroy Russia's potential for aggression.
Zelensky wants to intensify the attacks on Russia. This means only one thing: a bigger clash in the coming days. Moscow is certainly preparing for it. It is sending more troops and military assets to the border regions. Locals here are getting warnings like this one. Russians near the Ukrainian border have been asked to stop using dating apps. Apparently, they compromise safety, dating apps. Moscow believes that Ukrainian forces are also using the same apps to gather intelligence, so the locals in Russia have been asked to stay away from them. Moscow has also launched a counter-operation against the Ukrainians operating in Russia. They've managed to slow down the advances from Kiev, but Putin says a stronger response is coming.
The same way we fought with terrorists previously, now we fight with those who commit crimes in Kursk region, Donbass, and Novorossiya. But the same way we achieved our goals in the fight against terrorism, we will achieve our goals in the fight against neo-Nazism. And we will certainly punish the criminals. There can be no doubt about that.
That statement was for the Ukrainian soldiers. Putin calls them terrorists and criminals. He paid a visit to Chechnya yesterday, his first visit to the region in close to 13 years. Now, Chechnya is important. It has shaped Putin as a politician. It propelled him to the Russian presidency. In the late 1990s, Putin had launched the Second Chechen War. He was Russia's prime minister back then. The region used to be a hotspot for separatist movements and Islamist activities. Putin stamped out the separatists. The war in Chechnya made him extremely popular, and now he's counting on Chechen fighters to defeat Ukraine.
The one thing is to shoot at the shooting gallery here, and the other thing is to put life and health at risk. But you have an inner demand to fight for fatherland and courage to make such a decision.
There is hectic activity in Moscow as well. The Chinese premier is in town. Li Qiang is on a 4-day visit to Russia. He met with his Russian counterpart today. And what was the purpose of this visit? Well, both sides say that they want to strengthen ties, increase trade, expand cooperation in important areas like energy and nuclear power. But of course, the war will be discussed. Last week, Beijing had made an appeal asking both Russia and Ukraine to stop the escalation. The appeal fell on deaf ears. Ukraine wants to launch more attacks and Russia wants to retaliate hard. So a diplomatic solution looks unlikely at the moment because Putin and Zelensky still want to settle this on the battlefield.
Michelle Obama.
America
Hope is making a comeback. Please welcome America's 44th president and the love of my life, Barack Obama.
Chicago! It's good to be home. Thank you.
As you can probably guess after that introduction, our next story is about the US presidential election. Yesterday was day 2 of the Democratic National Convention. Traditionally, these conventions are held for one reason, so that the party can select their presidential candidate. But that was already wrapped up a few days ago. The Democrats officially nominated Kamala Harris on August 5th. However, that did not stop them from following tradition. There was a roll call last night, which soon turned into a dance party. With the formalities out of the way, they got down to their real business. You see, this year's Democratic National Convention, or DNC as it's called, is not about nominating Kamala Harris. It is about energizing the Democratic Party, which had been battered, bruised and demoralized after Joe Biden's debate with Donald Trump. Enthusiasm was at an all-time low. But now, a month and a half later, they're having dance parties. The mood change is striking. Harris's nomination has uplifted their spirits. However, it won't be enough to win the election. Her victory is not guaranteed by any means. Technically, she is leading in the polls, but the margin is narrow. One goof up and she could fall behind. And Kamala Harris knows this. So she wasn't even at the convention last night. Actually, she wasn't even in the same state. The DNC is taking place in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois. But Harris was campaigning in the neighboring state of Wisconsin, which is a swing state. It is crucial for her presidential bid. So that's where she was campaigning. And you can see that the Democrats are not taking anything for granted. They put Harris to work even as her nomination was being celebrated. So then, how did they energize their voters? Well, they brought out a few crowd favorites, the Obamas, starting with Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, and one of the most popular Democrats in the US right now. Yesterday, she used that popularity to drum up support for Kamala Harris, and she also took a swing at Donald Trump.
My husband and I sadly know a little something about this. For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black. I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
This was in response to what Trump said a few weeks ago. He said illegal immigrants were taking away black jobs. What does that mean? How do you define a black job? The term has racist overtones, and Michelle Obama turned this against Trump last night. It was a big departure from her earlier strategy. In 2016, her motto was, "When they go low, we go high." Basically, it was about taking the high road. But that's gone now. Instead, we saw her attacking Trump head-on, which means that she knows he's a serious threat. She also tried to instill some backbone into the Democrats, preparing them for the long road ahead.
So, if they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. If we see a bad poll, and we will, we got to put down that phone and do something. If we start feeling tired, if we start feeling that dread creeping back in, we got to pick ourselves up, throw water on our face, and what?
Michelle Obama really whipped up the crowd. She was followed by former US President Barack Obama, and he did not hold back either.
A 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. It has been a constant stream of gripes, and grievances that's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse. America's ready for a new chapter. America's ready for a better story. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
The speeches by the Obamas got the crowd very, very excited. But this was only to be expected because this is the Democratic convention and the people present here are going to vote for the Democratic nominee.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. It has been a constant stream of gripes and grievances that's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse. America's ready for a new chapter. America's ready for a better story. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
So there is joy and hope in this camp. Meanwhile, on the other side, Donald Trump is busy rallying his own supporters, and he's getting some help from Silicon Valley, from the likes of Elon Musk, the billionaire owner of the social media platform X. He recently interviewed Donald Trump on X. Elon Musk interviewed Trump, and now he's conducting a poll. He calls it a super unscientific poll to gauge voting preferences. Almost 5 million people have voted so far, and Trump is leading Harris 74 to 26. It really is super unscientific. But this gives a morale boost to Trump supporters. So in a way, Musk is for Trump what the Obamas are for Harris. And he's not the only tech mogul backing Trump. There are a host of them lining up to fund the Trump campaign through a donor network, which was co-founded by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance. And how much money have they raised? Between $70 to $80 million, and this is just one donor network. So why Silicon Valley backing Trump? It's because the tech world wants deregulation in certain sectors like cryptocurrencies and artificial intelligence, and they believe that Trump is the one who will deliver this. That is why they're pouring millions into Trump's campaign. And if there's one universal truth, it is this: money influences elections. That is a fact. And all this tech money will help Trump, which is part of the reason why the Obamas are still worried. It's why they told the crowd to expect setbacks. They're planning for the long haul. And the DNC is but a blissful pit stop before the real race begins. And we're tracking this closely. For more details and insights, you can catch Firstpost America live from the DNC in Chicago. It airs right after Vantage. Now let's talk about the Indian rupee. It is having a tough time. Today, the rupee suffered its worst single-day drop in close to 2 months. $1 was worth nearly 84 rupees. In fact, August has been a bad month for the rupee. A few weeks ago, it breached the 84 rupee mark against the dollar. This was an all-time low for the Indian currency, and today it has seen the biggest single-day fall in a while. So what triggered this fall? A sell-off in the Indian markets. Foreign investors pulled some $1.2 billion. because panic has been sweeping through global markets. America's weak job data sparked recession fears. And the rising tensions in West Asia led investors to unwind their positions. They wanted to get out of risky assets. They wanted to shift their money to safer investments. So there was a sell-off globally. It hit the Indian markets too, and it ended up putting pressure on the rupee. In the past few weeks, we've also seen some recovery, but today the rupee ended up reversing most of its gains. It lost what it had recovered, and it faces more challenges ahead. The sell-off from foreign investors continues. So far, they have withdrawn more than $2.5 billion from Indian markets. And these are numbers just from the month of August, and August is not over yet, remember. These withdrawals, the withdrawals from foreign investors, have hit the currency, leaving the Indian rupee weaker and the US dollar stronger. Overall, the greenback is in higher demand. The dollar has been appreciating against the yen, the euro and the yuan. Importers are buying the dollar aggressively. They fear that if the dollar appreciates any further, it could make their imports more expensive, because most of the international trade is done in dollars, and this holds true for importers in India as well. Let me explain this with the help of an example. Imagine that there's an importer in India, and they plan to buy a big consignment from overseas in the coming months. They know that they'll have to pay for this consignment using the US dollar. So they're going to need a lot of dollars. After all, the dollar is the world's reserve currency, so most foreign exchange reserves are in US dollars. So Indian importers rely on the dollar too. And when they see the rupee slipping, they try to build a safety net around their business. If they expect the rupee to weaken further, what do? They buy extra dollars from the market, so that if the rupee keeps falling, they won't have to pay more in the days ahead. They won't have to spend more on their imports. That is why they buy dollars. This is what investors call hedging. And right now, Indian importers are doing a lot of it. They're engaging in a lot of hedging. India's Reserve Bank has taken note of this. It is working to defend the rupee. Time and again, the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, has offloaded dollars from its reserves and bought the Indian currency. Reports say the RBI also reached out to leading Indian banks. They were advised to not bet against the rupee in the market. In the next few months, we will see how this unfolds. It is going to be crucial, not just for the rupee, but also for India's fight against inflation, because the RBI expects inflation to rise starting September.
With this high share of food in the consumption basket, food inflation pressures cannot be ignored. Further, public at large understands inflation more in terms of food inflation than the other components of headline inflation. Therefore, we cannot and should not become complacent merely because core inflation has fallen considerably.
He spoke about core inflation. Overall inflation in India has remained around the 4% mark, which is a good place to be. 4% is the RBI's target for inflation. But we are talking about overall inflation at 4%, remember. Food inflation, like the RBI governor said, is higher. In July, it was well above 5%. And a weakening rupee could make it worse. It would drive up the cost of key imports like crude oil. And remember, when oil becomes expensive, everything else also costs more because you need oil to transport these goods. So that's the challenge that India faces. Many experts had hoped that this battle would be short-lived. But India's Reserve Bank seems to be preparing for a longer fight to defend the rupee and to keep inflation in check. Now let's talk about Mpox. It is spreading globally. Today, Thailand recorded its first case. It was a European man who had recently visited Africa. Now, these growing cases are causing alarm. Countries are screening travelers. Argentina has quarantined an entire ship over a suspected case. The World Health Organization, that raised an alarm last week, now says Mpox is not the new COVID. Africa is appealing to the world to show solidarity, not impose travel bans. But here's the unfortunate part. This wave of infections broke out in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they still don't have the vaccines because the West is hoarding them. They're sitting on vaccine stockpiles. Shares of Mpox vaccines have surged by 40%, but Africa has no shots. Our next report tells you more.
The situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. detection and rapid spread of a new clade of Mpox in eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. A coordinated international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives.
That was the WHO chief on the 14th of August. It declared Mpox a public health emergency. But for doctors in the Democratic Republic of Congo, this is not new. They have been battling this disease for 2 years now.
The skin lesion disease comes from I don't know where. I can't even remember the name of the disease. We were told that it comes after eating game, but neither I nor my child have eaten game. These symptoms just appeared.
Since January, the DRC has recorded 16,000 cases of Mpox. There have been 570 deaths. Yet, the DRC doesn't have a single dose of the Mpox vaccine. So where are the vaccines? Well, they're in the West. Most Western countries stockpiled it during the 2022 outbreak. Africa says they are now sitting on it. Take Spain, for example. It still has 500,000 vials of the Mpox vaccine. The Netherlands currently has 100,000 vials. Germany has 117,000 doses, which has led to accusations of vaccine hoarding. And this is not the first time.
So 50 years on, there has been a shameful lack of investment to support researchers in African countries to really understand Mpox better. We still globally do not have a good understanding of Mpox, on the outbreaks, how it spreads, how many asymptomatic cases do we have for every case that we find with symptoms. We do not have a good understanding.
Today, Thailand recorded its first Mpox case. It was a European who travelled from Africa. The 66-year-old male arrived in the country on August 14th. He's being quarantined in a hospital. It has also spread to countries like Sweden, Pakistan and the Philippines. Meanwhile, Argentina has quarantined a cargo ship. It's over a suspected case of the virus. The patient zero was a crew member of Indian nationality. He started showing cyst-like lesions, so authorities have made the ship drop anchor in the Parana River. Currently, there's only one vaccine that has regulatory approval for Mpox. It's produced by Bavarian Nordic. There are other smallpox vaccines that can be used. But since the outbreak, Bavarian Nordic's share has soared. They're up by 40%. But can the company meet the demand? Bavarian Nordic claims that it can produce 10 million doses by the end of 2025. But who will pay for it? African countries don't have the resources, which means the West will have to step up. But the question is, are they willing to do so?
We can and must tackle Mpox together, across regions and continents. So will we choose to put the systems in place to control and eliminate Mpox globally, or we will enter another cycle of panic and neglect? How we respond now and in the years to come will prove a critical test for Europe and the world.
Europe says it will send more than 215,000 Mpox vaccine doses to Africa. Japan has pledged 3 million doses. The US has pledged 50,000. But will that be enough? The DRC alone needs 3.5 million doses. Meanwhile, Africa needs over 10 million doses. So the need of the hour is a coordinated response. Unless Africa gets vaccines, we will not see the end of Mpox anytime soon. Because diseases know no borders.
Imagine you're looking to buy something, maybe a gadget or a kitchen utensil or a piece of clothing. What's the first thing you would do? Probably go to an e-commerce website, your Amazons or Mintras. It's the default reaction for most of us. It tells you how common online shopping is. But India's Commerce Minister says that's not necessarily a good thing. He's called it a matter of concern.
Just think about it. Are we going to cause huge social disruption with this massive growth of e-commerce. And I don't see it a matter of pride that half our market could possibly become a part of the e-commerce network 10 years from now. It's a matter of concern. Cloud kitchens. What is the impact of these cloud kitchens? Very nice, 4 or 5 chefs will get a work there and 4 or 5 delivery boys. Of course, we'll end up becoming a country of couch potatoes, watching OTT and having food at home every day. और फ्रेंडशिप घर पे बैठ के OTT पे स्विगी और जोमेटो ऑर्डर करके फ्रेंडशिप्स नहीं क्रिएट होती है, वो तो कॉफी शॉप में जाके क्रिएट होती है.
The minister basically raised 2 problems. Number 1, the health impact. He says e-commerce is turning us into couch potatoes. We are watching content on OTT, ordering food from home and even shopping from our couch. So the minister asks, where is the social interaction? What happened to going out for dinner or physical shopping? Which brings us to concern number 2, the impact on local businesses. Piyush Goyal says e-commerce giants are disrupting the market. They're edging out millions of small retailers, and he specifically targeted Amazon. Listen to this.
When Amazon says we are going to invest $1 billion in India and we all celebrate, we forget the underlying story that $1 billion is not coming in for any great service or any great investment to support the Indian economy. They made $1 billion loss in their balance sheet that year. They have to fill in that loss. If you make 6,000 crore loss in 1 year, does that not smell of predatory pricing to any of you? What did that loss come on? They are, after all, an e-commerce platform.
Some background first. Global e-commerce giants cannot sell directly in India. They cannot stock or sell anything. They can only let others sell on their platform. Basically, they're a marketplace. But the reality is quite different. These platforms do sell directly using shady networks. Have you wondered how Amazon or Flipkart are able to give such steep discounts? Or why products always seem cheaper online? The minister says it could be predatory pricing. And what is that? Well, companies purposely charge less for a product. Yes, they will incur a loss, but they will also add plenty of new customers. So the trade-off is worth it, or so they say. The Commerce Minister also came with numbers. He says Amazon reported 6,000 crore rupees in losses. That's $714 million US, which is a bit high for a marketplace company. So the theory is that this loss is because of predatory pricing. Of course, Amazon will deny all of this, but it gives us a chance to look at the e-commerce market in India. It's worth almost $70 billion already, $70 billion, which is 7% of the total retail market. By the year 2030, it is projected to reach $325 billion. Now, if this projection holds, $325 billion, India will become the 3rd largest online market. And what about the users? How many Indians actually shop online? Just 4.3% of the population, that is all. Compare that to other countries. In China, it is 25%. In the UK, it is 23%. In India, only 4.3% of the population shops online. But the bottom line is quite clear. India's e-commerce industry is still growing, which is why the minister's comments are strange. Does the government want to put the brakes on e-commerce? Well, not quite. Piyush Goyal accepted that e-commerce is here to stay, but he wants it to be more organized. He wants the pricing to be fair. Well, that's actually up to the government, because consumers will always prioritize 2 things. One is low price and second, comfort. Right now, e-commerce offers both, and the pandemic is also responsible for this change. Most Indians were locked down for more than a year, so they discovered e-commerce. In fact, it became their only option in a lot of cases, to buy groceries, to buy medicines, and to buy most essential goods. The pandemic may be behind us, but this practice has stayed. So the onus is now on the government. How can they regulate e-commerce in India? Well, they did try. We saw an attempt in late 2021. The government set up an open source non-profit marketplace, ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC. The idea was quite simple: offer an alternative to the likes of Amazon or Swiggy or Zomato. That was what they were trying to do. No hidden costs, no predatory prices. Everything was supposed to be transparent. And how is ONDC doing? Well, they get around 60,000 food orders per day. 60,000 per day. Swiggy and Zomato get 2 million each. So there's a long way to go. But ultimately, there's only one solution. We need more competition because right now it is a duopoly. Flipkart makes up 48% of India's online market. Amazon makes up 26%. That's two companies with 3/4 of the market. So it's easier for them to manipulate it. A more crowded market would certainly be fairer. But even then, some of the minister's concerns remain. Laziness for sure. But also the issue of small retailers. We're talking about millions of small neighborhood shops. Entire families depend on them. So if e-commerce takes over, what will these people do? Will they adapt to the online shopping trend? Or will they be wiped out? We say it's good that the government is asking the right questions, but I'm afraid the answers too must come from them. In Sweden, the hunting season begins today and the government has issued the license to kill about 500 brown bears. You're not kidding. Starting today, Swedes are officially allowed to kill 20% of brown bears in the country. And why is that? Because the government says that there are too many bears. The great hunt is expected to bring their population down to 2,000, which is a drop of about 40% since 2008. Ecologists are concerned. They say this is not a hunt for preservation or for protection. It is a trophy hunt. So who is right? Should countries allow mass hunts of animals? Is there a better way to deal with this? Here's a report.
Sweden has always had a complicated relationship with its brown bears. Kind of like a seesaw of love and hate, where balance remains elusive. Here's why. In the mid-1800s, Sweden had thousands of bears. The animal is Sweden's largest predator. So, it was not good news. But by the early 1900s, brown bears were hunted almost to extinction in the country. Around 1930, only 130 bears remained. So Sweden hit crisis mode. At the turn of the century, they wanted to save the bears again. Their policy made a complete U-turn. The bear population was carefully managed. And their numbers did increase. They reached a peak of 3,300 in 2008. But guess what happened next? Sweden forgot to learn from its mistakes, obviously. So it's repeating them. Since the 2010s, bears have become Sweden's enemy number one. An increasing number of bears have been hunted. And this has worsened over the past 5 years. But this hunt is not on a whim. The Swedish government orchestrates this through the annual hunting season. Last year, a record 722 brown bears were killed. And this year, the bloodbath begins again. Starting today, Swedes will participate in the country's annual bear hunt. Officials have granted licenses. So people quite literally have the license to kill. How many bears? Exactly 486. That's less than last year's big number. But officials say that the numbers can increase over the year. If bears are considered a threat to farm animals, people can shoot them. Now, 486 may not seem like a big number, but that's 20% of the country's brown bear population. This would bring the total bear population down to 2,000. That's a drop of 40% since 2008. The government remains undeterred. They call this protective hunting, something that's necessary to keep the population in check. But ecologists are concerned. The high number of licenses have alarmed conservationists. They call this a quote-unquote trophy hunt, conducted to kill animals for fun and not for protection. And they are not wrong. Countries often issue hunting licenses to control animal populations, and sometimes they have a strange way of doing so, like hiring bounty hunters to kill snakes, or holding competitions to kill cats. So Sweden is not alone here. And bears aren't the only ones on its list. For years now, Sweden has carried out hunts of wolves, wolverines, lynxes, seals, and eagles to prevent damage to crops, livestock, forests, and fisheries. Sure, the population control of animals is important, but researchers say there are other humane ways to do so, like reproductive control. But that's a lot of work. So the government would rather arm itself and take the shortcut. But there's a problem here. If Sweden continues to kill bears at this rate, it will be inviting trouble. Because they are one annual hunt away from reaching the minimum number of bears required in the country, which is 1,400, and one step away from being stuck in a loop of cull and conservation.
For our next story, let me ask you a question. Are you planning a trip to Japan? If you are, one place is a must visit, the humble 7-Eleven, Japan's beloved convenience store. You can get anything and everything there. Midday snacks, gourmet items, even emergency toilet supplies. These stores are like a lifeline, open 24/7 for 365 days. Not just that, 7-Elevens are a social media sensation. The internet loves them. For Japan, it's more of an institution, a huge part of their identity. But for how much longer? I ask because 7-Eleven is facing a buyout offer by Alimentation Couche-Tard, or ACT. It's a Canadian convenience store giant, so technically a rival. Most of its stores are in North America. And how much is the offer worth? A record $38 billion. That's 5.6 trillion Japanese yen. Now, ACT says it's a friendly proposal. The offer is non-binding, so it may not even go ahead. And Japan says the same. 7-Eleven is owned by the 7&I Holdings. It says it has formed a committee. They will review the offer and see whether it's worth considering. But the mere prospect has rattled Japan. They cannot imagine 7-Eleven being North American, which is also odd because 7-Eleven was founded in Texas back in the year 1927. And for most of the 20th century, it was American. It was only in the year 1974 that it struck a deal with Japan's Ito Yokado. It's the first 7-Eleven after that opened in Japan. After 1974, it became popular. By 1991, the Japanese company bought a 70% stake in 7-Eleven, and the rest, as they say, is history. Today, 7-Eleven is the world's biggest convenience store chain. The world's biggest. They have 85,000 shops across 20 countries. In Asia, it's almost a staple, which makes this takeover bid a tough one for Japan. Also first for them. Something like this has never happened before. No Japanese company this big has ever been acquired by a foreign firm. It's because of two reasons. One, Japan's protectionist policies, and two, their choice of stability over profit. But that seems to be changing. Japan is now more open to foreign buyers, though a purchase of this magnitude could be sensitive. Because 7-Eleven is just not just an economic asset, it is culturally significant. Foreign ownership could be a threat to that identity. And there have been other such examples in the past. Take Cadbury, for instance. It was a British institution. It has a 2-century-long legacy of making chocolates. In 2010, it faced a takeover bid from American rival Kraft Foods. Cadbury tried to resist, but in the end, Kraft acquired it for more than $19 billion. It also prompted a revamp, though. The acquisition did not go well with the UK, so the UK government changed the way takeovers work. Then there was Volvo, a Swedish automotive icon. In 2010, Chinese car maker Geely acquired it for $1.8 billion. And this was the first time a Chinese car maker bought 100% of its rival. It raised concerns, especially about Volvo's brand identity. Same goes for US Steel. Earlier this year, Japan's Nippon Steel announced that it was going to acquire this company. The deal is worth $15 billion, but it is facing resistance, especially from the White House. US President Joe Biden wants it to remain American-owned. And that's the thing with foreign takeovers. There are too many equations at play, and no single metric to assess a deal like this. In some cases, it's a good move. For example, if a company is going bust or if you need access to newer markets, then a foreign takeover may not be a bad idea. But in other cases, it can be detrimental, especially if you lose control of key industries or you lose something that's culturally significant. So it really depends on the deal at hand, which brings us back to the case of Japan. The deal may make sense economically, but Japan may not end up selling 7-Eleven. We don't know that yet, but that's a possibility because it cannot put a value on the brand and its cultural significance. Now we turn to Africa, to Kenya in the east, where a suspected serial killer is on the loose. Last month, 9 dead bodies were discovered in a quarry in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. All the victims were women. 3 days after the discovery, the police arrested a suspect. He confessed to killing 42 women over the span of 2 years and dumping their remains in the quarry. At the time, the Kenyan police described him, and I'm quoting, they called him a vampire and a psychopath. He was kept in detention since his arrest, but yesterday he broke out. This suspected serial killer and 12 others escaped from a police station in Nairobi, apparently with the help of some guards. 8 police officers have been arrested since, and a manhunt is underway to find Kenya's quarry killer. Here's our report.
These were the scenes from Kenya's capital, Nairobi, yesterday. A police station became a crime scene after a jailbreak.
13 prisoners escaped from the cells, among them 12 Eritrean nationals who were arrested for being illegal in Kenya, and 1 male murder suspect, namely Collins Chumaisi Kalusha, who is connected with the Quarry murder incident.
The Quarry murder incidents he's referring to are a series of gruesome murders committed by a suspected serial killer. The police say it was this man, Collins Chumaisi Kalusha. He was arrested last month. This is how the police described him.
It is crystallizing that we are dealing with a serial killer, a psychopathic serial killer who has no respect for human life.
Kalusha is the prime suspect in a spate of killings where women were dismembered and dumped into a quarry in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. The first victim was found on July 13th, and this sparked the hunt for more bodies. 8 others soon turned up at the quarry, which was a dumping ground. The bodies were discovered barely 100 meters away from a police station, sparking public outrage. So the police worked fast and arrested their suspect within days. They even got a confession out of him.
On interrogation, the suspect confessed to have lured, killed and disposed 42 female bodies at the dumping site.
Collins Chumaisi Kalusha's first victim was apparently his wife. He allegedly killed her in 2022. That's when his killing spree started, and he killed his last victim just 5 days before he was arrested. His lawyers deny this version of events. They say he was tortured into confessing. The investigation is still ongoing, and Kalusha has been in police custody since his arrest. He last appeared in court on Friday. His custody was extended by 30 days so that the police could wrap up their investigation. But before they could finish their probe, Kalusha escaped. Kalusha and 12 others apparently cut a wire security mesh in the police compound. They climbed through the hole and then jumped a perimeter wall. The police discovered that Kalusha and the others were missing at about 5 a.m. on Tuesday when they were supposed to get breakfast. So how is it that the prime suspect in a serial killer investigation could escape? Well, apparently he had help.
Our preliminary investigation indicated that the escape was aided by insiders, considering that officers were deployed accordingly to guard the station. Consequently, I have interdicted 8 officers who were on duty last night.
8 police officers are accused of helping the 13 prisoners escape. They have been arrested and are being questioned. Meanwhile, a manhunt is on to find the fugitives, especially Kalusha. But this means that a potential serial killer is on the loose in Kenya.
The floor is always sticky, everything is broken, there is a lot of throwing up, someone is crying and no one is sleeping. We're not describing a college party, that's parenthood summed up for you. Bad jokes aside, parenting can be very rewarding. There are highs and lows and they're worth it. But in all seriousness, parenting is also exhausting. According to a survey, 40% parents say that they're so tired that they can't be the parent they want to be. So some couples are sharing the load, but not with each other. These couples are sharing child-rearing duties with complete strangers. They are renting fake parents. If this term sounds crass, do know that the real designation is professional mom. Doesn't make it better, does it? The rent-a-parent industry is filled with women. Professional dads, like regular dads, are more present for a child's athletic development. They are hired for the real manly stuff, apparently. Other responsibilities fall on the women. And we're not making this up. But lately, more nuanced vocabulary is being added to the mix. Rented parents are now called child companions. Kind of like when parents say, treat me like I'm your friend. Only this is even more creepy. But how does it work? Unlike nannies or tutors, child companions have traditional parental responsibilities like taking children to the hospital, feeding them, changing diapers, even discussing breakups. Now, we all know how kids love taking romantic advice from parents. But maybe proxies of helicopter parents are not as repulsive. For these wide-ranging duties, child companions make a hefty sum. Sometimes even thousands of dollars per month, especially in China, where uber-wealthy couples are paying the top dollar for professional child rearing. Many of these glorified nannies are top graduates from prestigious universities like Harvard, Cambridge, and Peking University. You see, youth unemployment is rising in China. It stands at about 20%. So young graduates are looking for side gigs, even if that means bearing the OK boomer jibe a few years too soon. And this practice is not unique to China. Parenting rentals have become a growing global trend from Japan to the US, in fact, especially the US, where the trend first began during the pandemic. Children left for college and parents were unable to reach them in far-flung campuses, so they started paying other people, well, women, to parent their college-going children. Rental moms bring these adult children soup. They make their beds. Again, we are not making this up. So apparently this dysfunctional parenting is for children of all ages, and child companions do not mind it. They want to embark on the fake parenting journey, not in the spiritual sense, of course, more like the journey of flitting from room to room, picking up the same toys again and again. And this arrangement works for some parents as well, because family structures are changing. Young, inexperienced parents with full-time jobs and full-time parenting responsibilities do not have the grandparents to help out. So they're seeking professional help, kind of like ordering takeout when you don't want to cook. But how much is too much? Sure, the maternal load never ceases to end, but can it really be outsourced? Is this beneficial for the parent-child relationship? Won't the real parents miss out on the little joys of parenthood? And is this really good for the children? At the end of the day, fake parents can make a child's bed, but they cannot turn them into fully functioning adults. That is a parent's job. So when the services are withdrawn, these children may face crushing disappointment. But until the realization hits, child companions are happy to hit the ground diapering. The Democratic Convention is happening right now. We've been telling you about it. It's supposed to be serious business, nominating the next person who will bomb West Asia. But things don't always go to plan, because conventions have a lot of moving parts. Back-to-back speeches, music and lights, a lot of props, and in the end, the balloon drop. Any one of these can go wrong easily, and in the past it has. You've seen speakers talking to empty chairs, copying someone else's speech, and we've also seen the balloon drop go horribly wrong. So tonight we've compiled a list of weird moments from political conventions. Take a look.
Balls enough! And I said, let trouble media! It's getting hot in here.
Mr. President, how do you handle promises that you've made when you were running for election, and how do you handle it?
You work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise, that you treat people with respect. We want our children in this nation to know that the only limit to your achievements is the strength of your dreams and your willingness to work for them.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
You work hard for what you want in life. That your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do. That you treat people with dignity and respect. We want our children and all children in this nation to know that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
Damn!
Women are not without electoral.
One eternity later.
Or political power.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Indonesia, climbers barely escaped death after a volcano that they were climbing starts erupting. Heavy rains and floods affect at least 200,000 people in eastern Bangladesh, and drones help repair parts of the Great Wall of China. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre by 3 Italian handymen. The painting wasn't really famous before this, but the theft turned it into one of the world's most famous artworks. The painting was found in 1913 in Florence. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired. I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.